Okay. Welcome, welcome. Just gonna do a breakdown of Evan Silva's final mock draft, but mainly I'm gonna be talking about QBs. I'm gonna come back later and try to do my full big board. Fortunately, I couldn't get it all done. Just too much work. Had to go into it before the draft, but over the summer I plan to like slowly but surely go into that and just a few more things about evaluating not only not only college prospects, mainly that of course, but also the NFL guys. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know what a good, average, great, etc., however you want to designate them, NFL player looks like, how can you really know what to look for with a college guy? Great example of this is looking at quarterback, which is going to be most of what I talk about in this video. Looking at the quarterback position and people trying to project them this year, you've got people who feel like it basically feel like you have to be an all pro to be worth taking in the first round. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. Like they lean towards you need to be an all pro player, or oh man, that's not good enough for me. And it's like so then you end up thinking, because most all pros have like really really impressive arms, that you have to always just lean towards a guy with a looks like they have an impressive arm. And you wonder why the bust rates are so high, and you wonder why people don't go back and aren't are running and hiding from their takes for previous years all the time. Well, yeah, because you're looking for the wrong things. A first round quarterback, the perfect example of a first round quarterback for me for years now has been Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins obviously didn't go in the first round, and he didn't even start right away, or at least not for full time. The Redskins back then had a litany of QBs who were running in and out of the lineup after that initial year where Robert Griffin was healthy and won Rookie of the Year. So Kirk like played sporadically over the next two seasons, but once he got in, still wasn't good. It really took the guy to his fifth year to be relevant in the NFL, which now you would never get the opportunity. I mean, Sam Howell just had a better first year starting than most players have, most QBs have, and did show promise at least to be a high level backup. And the new regime said we don't want him. Send him to Seattle. So, these things happen, or these things don't happen anymore. Your leash is so short, no matter who you're with or what team you're on. Like everyone's just microwave, microwave, microwave. They want instant radiated food, right? So, when you've got the looking at the QB position and looking at what makes a first round quarterback, a good definition of it is, can you be a top 12 QB, or close enough that it's at least debatable, reasonably debatable for half your career or more. And if you can get that, then I think that's worth a first rounder, if that's what you think that person will be. Now, if you're giving conditions from day one, or really day zero, before they're even drafted, like people are doing with, say, McCarthy, where it's like, oh, well, if they're in the right situation. Well, if they need to be in the right situation, you probably need to be dropping them down your board, right? Here's a guy who doesn't need to be in the right situation, Caleb Williams, right? Everyone knows he's going number one. What can I say about Caleb? Best thing I can say about Caleb is that I will be shocked if he's not worth the first rounder in the context I just described the first rounder as. It would shock me. It would blow my mind. He just checks way too many boxes. He's a rare prospect who actually has all of the pocket skills and the creativity and the arm talent and the hand size. Get to hand size later. Everything. Like, he just has everything. The only thing he's missing physically, or like checkbox profile wise, is he could definitely stand to be an inch and a half taller, weigh like 5 more pounds. That'd be great. Then he'd be 6'3" ish and 220 pounds. I mean, that'd be perfect. But other than that, he checks all that. Getting all his negatives out the way. His fumbles need to be cleaned up. What I will say about the fumble thing, though, is people did this to Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert wasn't near as bad as Caleb Williams, but they did this to Justin Herbert. People did a lot of ridiculous things to Justin Herbert when he was coming out. But there's a difference between fumbling because you're Justin Fields and you don't know what's going on in the field and you can't process at all and you can't multitask at all on the field, so you're getting hit and sacked and pressured and you don't know why all the time. There's a difference between that level of fumbling, which Justin Fields has been one of the most likely to fumble players you'll ever see play quarterback in the NFL. And then there's fumbling where you're just not protecting the ball. Most of Caleb Williams' problems are from him just not protecting the ball, and that tends to get cleaned up with QBs very quickly. Justin Herbert cleaned his up. He had the same issue, and I'm just not worried about it, but it is something that he will have to do. Because if he's fumbling the way Fields was, he's going to be losing games. They shouldn't. The Ravens just missed out on the Super Bowl in large part because of a fumble at the 1 yard line. I mean, you got to protect the ball. The next thing I would say with Caleb is, and this is only going to be a problem when people cherry pick it, and when he just fails, right? Which will also be cherry picking because he won't fail most of the time. But Caleb, as everyone knows who's watched any videos on him or done any scouting on him, he does pass up the routine play looking for a big one. Now, was he doing that purely because USC was trash on defense all year long and trash on the O-line, so he felt like he had to get plays where he could? I don't know. I would lean towards yes, but I don't know. What I do know is that he is going to have to modify that a little bit. Not too much, because you can be a big game hunter in the NFL and be crazy successful. Josh Allen is the big game hunter, but damn near, in the NFL. Just about. I mean, he's always near the top of average depth of target. And he's still at the very tip top of on target percentage despite throwing downfield so much. So there's nothing wrong with big game hunting. People like big game hunters. They like explosive plays down the field. They like Dante Culpepper highlights and Brett Favre highlights and Patrick Mahomes throwing deep downfield like he used to. This past year he definitely did and still won the Super Bowl, by the way. So average depth of target is really not a end all be all. And then last thing, and this is also not end all be all, time to throw, right? Time to throw is only relevant if you're having negative plays. If my time to throw was 5 damn seconds, which would be crazy, but my offense, I'm the QB, my offense is top 5 in like every stat you can think of, in efficiency, everything. Who cares? That means what I'm doing, my time to throw, means A, my O-line must be playing great, and or I'm just the Dumbledore of play extenders. I'm unreal. I'm incredible. I'm the shit. I'm him. And Caleb Williams is him when it comes to extending plays. And what people forget when they're repeating this dumbass rhetoric about time to throw and acting like it's a negative automatically, like broad brush, is that the longer the DB has to defend the wide receiver, the more likely the wide receiver is, or tight end, whoever, to get open. So you're only helping your team. People talk about raising your team around you and stuff. Well, that's what that looks like. You want to know what a QB looks like when they're raising the floor of their team? Go watch Caleb Williams at USC. And that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a guy who raises the floor of his wide receivers because he's extending plays. You're looking at a guy who's raising the floor of his linemen because he knows pressure's coming, he knows blitzes are coming, and he knows how to react in productive ways. In all directions, too. Some guys can't do it in all directions. Some guys can't go north, west, east, south, and diagonal. Some guys can only do the flip around move. Like, I think Bo Nix has some great foundational pocket attributes to build on. But he pretty much mostly goes north-south or does that flip around move, hopes that works out. Now, he knows where everybody is, so he can do the flip around move and his success rate at it will be through the roof. He doesn't get blindsided with it like some guys do. But still, some guys just don't have a full repertoire. Caleb has a full repertoire. A-plus prospect. Let me pull up my notes real quick on Caleb. He also had some really good statistical metrics. Look at this comparison chart right here. This is from Jim Coburn. He just really knocked it out of the park and smashed. From being people really care about age. Early breakout is something I value. I also value guys who had to deal with pressure and or adversity regularly in college. That's a big thing. I also like guys who show they've improved in certain areas, key areas over their years. That's a big thing. Overall attempts is a big thing. Caleb was solid there. Hand size, he hit the threshold. I'm big on thresholds. I'm big on things like that. My comp for Caleb, a lot of people, Aaron Rodgers and Kyler Murray and Mahomes. I think the Kyler Murray one's tiny bit disrespectful to Caleb because I just think they're very different players, and I would say the Kyler Murray version is not, from a passing standpoint, just is doing him a discredit. The Mahomes stuff, I see that. The Aaron Rodgers stuff, my problem with that is that Aaron Rodgers as a pro is who he's being compared to when people say that, and Aaron Rodgers didn't look like. Aaron Rodgers is actually the rare example of a guy who doesn't look anything like he did in college. Everyone else looks just like they look. I just rewatched Mahomes' record-breaking game versus OU he had his last year at Texas Tech, and he looks like the exact same player. Even his little mannerisms where he's after he gets like a first down, he's like walking back to the sideline, this kind of weird, kind of weirdish way that he does. Even that's the same. I mean, everything about his game is the same. He's the same player the Chiefs have. You know, he did not like transform into a different player. People just they couldn't scout him properly. That's all. That's a regular thing. People can't scout, but especially QBs. But Aaron Rodgers is a completely different. He spent his 3 years behind Favre reinventing his throwing motion. I mean, he just does not look the way he looked at Cal. And I liked him at Cal. I thought he was the best player in that draft. I thought he was the top QB and the best player. And he still reinvented himself anyways. He's a one of one, Aaron Rodgers. My comp is a mobile version of Brett Favre. That's what I think, because I do think Caleb will have enough erratic plays, and I could be underselling him. I would prefer to undersell players, though. I'm a floor guy. I am a big time floor guy. But yeah, a mobile version of Brett Favre playing in modern NFL. That's what I think of when I think of Caleb Williams, and that's his ceiling. That's my ceiling for him. I think there's some things Brett Favre did, good Brett Favre, not the trash one. I think Caleb will be much better than I don't think Caleb will ever be the turnover machine Brett Favre was. But I also think he's still got a little ways to go in terms of overall, field general play, reading coverages, and understanding anticipatory throws, and making some of those special plays Brett Favre would make. But I think he's right there, and I think he'll get there. His floor would be a mobile version, and he is very mobile. Ran 4.5 in high school. Absolutely, he's going to be a dual threat in every way that Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers is in the NFL. A mobile version of Jay Cutler. That's his floor. Is for some reason he's just fumbling, turn the ball over too much, doesn't pick up on defenses to the extent I'm expecting. So then he's Jay Cutler, but with more mobility, playing in an era that's more suited for a guy like that anyways, because this era is way more suited for QBs, especially QBs who have arm diversity, which Caleb has top tier in NFL history. His arm, he does everything. Some guys just have a strong arm. Caleb's arm can do everything. Velocity, touch, diversity of throws, you name it. He's got it all. That's enough about him. Moving on. Let's pick this up. Silva's thinks Drake May's going to Commanders. I actually think it's going to be Jane Daniels. I still think it's going to be Jane Daniels, despite all the weird stuff they did and the bachelor party thing they did with the QBs. I still think they're just going to take Jane Daniels. I think they signed Cliff for that reason. I think they'll find him to be safer, and I don't think they want to miss terribly at QB starting this new regime. And Drake May, you'd have to be an idiot to think Drake May doesn't have a higher bust factor than most QBs in this draft, but definitely than Jane Daniels. So I think they'll do the safer thing, and they probably have both extremely close. They clearly have a lot of QBs close if they're doing this much homework on all of them this late in the game. So I think they'll ride with Jane Daniels. And then the Patriot rumors, I think the Patriots are the same way. I think they're going to take either one of these guys that's there. Whoever's there, they're just going to take them. Of course, nobody wants them to. Everybody wants them to trade back and not ruin a QB prospect. But, listen, as much as situation matters, and it is the single most important thing. I didn't talk about this with Caleb in the Bears situation. I'll have to double back on that later. But the single most important thing is your situation. If your situation is awful, you're in trouble. You're probably going to be a bust. But it's never decided in 1 year. Josh Allen's a great example of this. He's gone to a great situation in Buffalo, but it only became great after year one. Year one, it was the worst situation in the league for any QB to get drafted to. The Bills traded up for him, if I'm not mistaken. And then he had a bottom five wide receiver unit, a bottom five O line. He got injured in large part because of that O line. He still went 5-6 as a starter. Still managed to win games because he was making plays with his legs, and that shit matters. Making plays with your legs in a productive way matters. So if you think Jaden Daniels is going to do that, if you think Drake May is going to do that, if you think JJ McCarthy is going to do that, then that raises their floor significantly. And I can see why guys like that, you don't let guys like that get past day two for sure. I certainly wouldn't. Hell, even if I had an established starter, I'd draft a guy like that if I thought he was really could really make a difference with his legs. See Jalen Hurts, right? Round two for the Eagles a few years ago. So, yeah, it's interchangeable. Speaking about Jaden Daniels first, he the way I tiered the QBs, and I'll do this more in a different video, but I had Jaden Daniels in my first round, in my top 50. I think I had him in my top 50 range, my top 50 bucket. And basically him and Nix and Penix all just ranked in the same tier as guys who you can draft, and if you are putting them in a situation that has at least a solid foundational floor, like your O-line's not terrible. Doesn't have to be great, but it can't be terrible. And you have somebody who they can lean on as a number one target. They don't have to be a top 10 wide receiver. They don't have to be a top 15 wide receiver even. Probably got to be close to it though. Then you've got a chance at least, and it makes sense, and you can build from there. But if you take them, they're not good enough, none of them. But if you take them and put them on, your traditional Jags rosters for the Jaguars, or what the Dolphins rosters always were forever and ever, or what the Jets still are apparently, then yeah, they're screwed. None of these guys, if they've been drafted to Zach Wilson's Jets, would do shit in the NFL. Not Jaden, not anyone in this draft, and I'd probably throw Caleb in there too. The Jets would probably find a way to ruin him too. So it's just a matter of avoiding those really, really terrible franchises that just traditionally ruin quarterback prospects. I don't know if the Redskins are that. The Patriots historically definitely aren't that. They actually are the best quarterback developing team in the NFL over the past 20 years, or since Belichick got there. And now, granted, they may have not put together a bunch of Pro Bowlers, but they put together two. Matt Castle made a Pro Bowl. Tom Brady's all-time QB1, right? So there's that. And then they've got all the other guys who, from Brian Hoyer to the guy Jacoby Brissett, who's there back there now, and more guys. They find QBs in the draft, Jimmy Garoppolo, and they actually work in the NFL. They can actually play football in the NFL. Most teams can't say that. 90% of teams or more cannot say that. They can't say they even pull that off. So, but that regime is gone. So we'll see what happens with that. I think Jaden Daniels in New England would be a bad fit, though. Jaden Daniels is his biggest flaw. Probably is, well, it's not his biggest flaw. It's not a flaw, but it's just his arm's not very strong. And I don't like guys with arm talent in his range playing outdoor cold weather all the time. I don't think it's going to work. Drake May, he's got small hands. I'll get into the hand size thing later. People get really sensitive when you bring up people's hands, but it's true. And I'm going to show you why it's true a little bit later when I get to JJ McCarthy, who has even smaller hands. Or JJ McJesus, sorry. Gotta anoint him and put respect on his name. A great prospect that he is. So, Drake May, the biggest problem with him is that he is a super erratic quarterback, at least this past year, and he regressed from year one to year two. And no, it wasn't just his teammates around him. It was just he just didn't improve. That's a red flag. That's a big time red flag. That makes me think of Jameis Winston. It makes me think he's just not going to develop in the NFL. People are like, oh, this guy can develop, this guy can improve. And people just pie in the sky assume you're going to improve, assume you're going to develop into a great player. It doesn't work that way. Assuming a player like Drake May puts in the work, assuming, which you have to assume because the work I'm talking about is not practice work. It's not your QB coach or your offensive coordinator. It's none of that shit. None of that's going to develop you. Your coaching staff in the NFL is not going to develop a player. If you're expecting the coaching staff to develop a player, then you can expect that coaching staff to not be around very long because they're all going to lose their jobs. The only thing that develops football players is their effort and hard work on their own time. That makes up at least 80% of it, and that's me being generous. Most of these guys, most of your great players, you know what they got? They got QB coaches. They got their own personal QB coach. Hell, DK Metcalf, I just learned he has a QB coach at some other SEC school. I forget which one it was, but he has his own wide receiver coach. Um, not the team's wide receiver coach. He has his own. Real professionals put in the work. That's how it works. That's what's going on. So when you're shooting a bunch of commercials like Baker Mayfield, um, you know, and then you admit later after you leave Cleveland, yeah, I could have worked harder. I could have been in my playbook more. Well, there you go. That's why you weren't that good. And you don't, none of us know for sure. We can only guess based on the information we have available. And I'm sure plenty, but every draft, everyone says the same thing. Everyone says the same thing about every QB prospect. Oh, I love the kid. I love the kid. The kid, this guy, the intangibles, da da da. Everyone, no one ever says a damn negative thing about any of these players. It is such a joke. Like, there's nothing bad about these people. Jaden Daniels, for example, at Arizona State, things did not go well there at the end of that regime there when he was leaving. And apparently his teammates hated him, or at least some of them did. That's interesting, right? Now, am I worried about it? No. But, I mean, that's interesting, though, right? It's not an impossibility that Jaden Daniels maybe he doesn't mesh with everybody. Maybe he isn't super A-plus intangible leadership guy, you know? I'm hearing things, at least from a small circle of people, that Josh Allen may have some issues with that in Buffalo. Now, they keep winning double-digit games every year, so, I mean, the rubber ain't going to hit the road anytime soon. But still, these things happen. Personalities matter. I don't know what Drake May's like. I don't know shit about him as a person. But even if you put in the work, Mariota put in the work, dude. Mariota put in tons of work. Still couldn't deliver on the promise a lot of people thought he had, including myself way back then at that time when I really had a ways to go in evaluating quarterbacks. He just couldn't do it. And Drake May, I will say, his highs are very high. His highs are very high. His highs remind me of, I think my comp for him was, my high-end comp. Let me just pull it up. My high-end comp was like a version of Sam Bradford. But, no, that's right. Sam Bradford's who I pretty much think he's going to be. That's right. It's Sam Bradford. Like a mobile Sam Bradford is pretty much what I think you're going to get from him, assuming he doesn't just flame out instantly the way like a Zach Wilson did in that realm. Assuming he's like actually playing year 5, year 6. I think of Sam Bradford. Sam Bradford had incredible talent as a passer, incredible ability when he was on point, where you're like, whoa, we got ourselves a QB. And that's Drake May. That's what he looks like as a passer, but he also looks absolutely terrible. Like, what are you doing? What's his name? Alex Rollins on YouTube did a great video. It was Drake May's video, but it was breaking down how subjective scouting is and how subjective film watching is. And he was using Drake May's film as an example, and it was beautiful. It was one of the best tutorial videos I've ever seen. Like, just going over the different ways you could view a play and be like, oh, this person thinks this play is great. This person thinks this play is terrible. J.J. McCarthy's infamous play against Ohio State is the same thing from this past season, where he throws the ball and he's claiming he scouted that player out. But other people are like, dude, that guy played like 50 snaps all year. How did you scout him and knew he was going to be there? And I'm looking at when the pressure comes, and I know what it looks like when a QB's throwing to get away from pressure. Like, he doesn't want to get hit. He wants to get the ball out and not get sacked. And that's what that looked like. So it looked like he just let the ball go. And if the linebacker doesn't turn, factually, it's an interception every time. Sian Fahey, I might be saying his name wrong, he used to have a site up, and he was doing tracking for all the he's the most intense and cruel evaluator of QB play I've ever seen, because he actually included the role of the defensive players into his evaluation, which most people just don't do. Like, they see a big play downfield and they disregard the fact that in a lot of cases that pass wasn't perfect, and if the DB just turned his head around, it's at best case scenario an incompletion, if not an interception. Drake May's leverage, his understanding of leverage of defenders, is not good. People comparing him to Justin Herbert need to go back to the QB evaluation school or wherever the hell they came from, because Justin Herbert's one of his signature strengths, and why his horrible gimmicky Oregon offense didn't hold him back and he hasn't held him back in the NFL, is because understanding leverage of defenders matters way more than whatever scheme you played. Schemes come and go. You run certain plays. You run the plays you're told to run at all levels. So the scheme gets overhyped by people who don't know how to evaluate quarterbacks. Understanding the leverage of defenders, on the other hand, you can't run away from it. You can't scheme that away. I could have the best scheme ever, and yeah, I could hide my QB. And if I have some really good players, I'll hide my QB. If you think Brock Purdy's terrible, you probably think that Shanahan's hiding his QB, and he's still putting up like top 5 numbers. But that's another conversation for what does that mean for the QB position. But that's another conversation for another day. Point is a guy like Drake May is bad with understanding leverage. Threw a lot of passes down the field that are basically like F it, prayer balls, 50-50 balls. And you know who else did that? Drew Lock did that. Drew Lock did that all day at Missouri, and he fooled some people because of it. He's almost fooled me. I had to really keep watching him to not end up putting him in a place he didn't belong, which is above that project tier of quarterbacks. I have these 5 archetypes. I'll do that in another video of quarterbacks, and I'll put a bunch of different guys who like all fit based on like their profile coming out. And one of the archetypes is basically like just a developmental project QB, like developmental starter, and that's like basically if they have enough talent, they're like day 2 guys generally, okay? And that's what Drake May looks like for the most part. That's what J.J. McCarthy looks like. That's what Daniel Jones looked like. That's what Drew Lock looked like, and a host of other guys. Jane Daniels, I would say, is a cut above. Jane Daniels was incredibly productive, accurate. His floor in every level, whether it be anticipation, his floor everywhere you looked, in terms of what a QB needs to bring to the table, was just just high enough that his overall game, playing behind a really great LSU team that was the best O-line in the country, not Oregon, not Washington, not even Michigan, definitely obviously not USC. It was LSU's, and I don't think it was that like close. And then he had, we gotta say, the best weapons. I mean, he had 2 guys who were about to go in the top 20, but then he probably has another 2 guys at receiver who later on will go in the top 20 in other drafts. Who knows? So yeah, it was the best situation, but he balled out. He did his job, and he smashed. So I think he's a high floor player. My comp for Jaden Daniels is Aaron Brooks. He's almost got the same exact physical dimensions. My biggest worry with him, though, is he absolutely has to change his running style. Not for the hits, not for that, but just all around. He can't run that way, period. He's not that kind of physical player. He is the skinniest player I've ever seen. He's the skinniest QB you've ever seen. You've never seen a more rail thin QB in your life. That's not good. He needs to not be getting hit by people. And if he is getting hit, it's not going to end well. So Jane Daniels, that's my biggest concern with him. It definitely lowers where I think his like high-end outcomes can be. Aaron Brooks, though, I guess it depends on what you think of Aaron Brooks, if you even watched him back in the day. But Aaron Brooks was the kind of guy who, yeah, the team, like he had Joe Horn to throw to, so like I said, he had a number 1 guy. His O-line had 1 or 2 guys at least who were solid enough players. He had Deuce McAllister in the backfield. he probably had another receiver there, or at least a guy who like was good at his role. Devery Henderson was on those Saints teams. He was their field stretcher. You know, you can put Jane Daniels in a situation like that, and you can see if he can raise the floor of his teammates or not. You'll find out pretty quick if you put him in a situation like that. New England probably won't be that situation year one, but like I said with Buffalo, things can change. Year one can look bad, and then the next year they like really get things going. They make a free agency signing. I remember Buffalo for Josh Allen. They went from I don't even know who the receivers were his first year anymore, but they brought in John Brown and Cole Beasley, and Cole Beasley was awesome, and John Brown was great at his role. And for that year, the Buffalo offense made significant leaps. Josh Allen made significant leaps. And then the next year, they bring in Stephon Diggs, and the rest is history. They've been dominating the AFC East since. So, and the NFL to an extent. So, you know, you never know what will happen. Year one can look bad, but the situation can change. We shouldn't automatically assume these are going to be F situations just because they don't look good. I care more about long-term record. Honestly, the Bears scare me as much as the Patriots or the Commanders because the Redskins. Sorry, you always be the Redskins to me, because the Patriots or the Bears, literally all time, have never had a real QB, like a prolific QB or anything close to it. So but it looks great right now. It looks great right now. Right now with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, it looks good. The O line's not good though. I hear some idiots talking about the O line. Oh, the Bears O line is is good. They're in a good spot. No, they're not. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? People are losing their minds out there. By the way, this is a little bit of a tangent, but there's people double talking in their own podcast. I listened to something on Player Profiler, and the guy said that let's see if the Bears do for Caleb what they didn't do for Justin Fields. But then in the same breath, they said, "Oh, that O line's ready to go in Chicago." What are you talking about? It's not ready to go either. It's not. You look at range of outcomes, right? Because injuries do happen. Injuries are real. Range of outcomes, you'd rather have a deep O-line than not, right? You'd rather have guys on backing up that have experience or at least talent, if nothing else, damn. Or at least they're good at one thing. Like maybe he sucks in the run game, but he's good in the pass game, vice versa. The Bears have that going for them, but they don't have a single player who is anywhere near like, okay, this is a perennial Pro Bowler. They don't have a single player like that. They've got a bunch of guys who are best case scenario middle of the pack. Best case scenario this year. Now, unless you think they're two tackles, they're young tackles. One was a first rounder last year. I can't think of his name right now. But unless you think they're going to go to the stratosphere, including their left tackle, projected left tackle right now, who's a 6th-round pick. A lot of good physical attributes, like super crazy long arms, and he tested like a good athlete, but he's a 6th-round pick, dude. Come on. And O-line, that's not how it works. O-line, guys, it's generally, unless something happens with their medicals or off the field, the good O-linemen go day one, day two, almost always. The NFL, that's one area of the draft where the NFL gets it. So the Bears don't have a good O-line. The Commanders damn sure don't have a good O-line. The Patriots don't have a good O-line. So all three of these teams are going to have to really make some improvements during this draft and over the coming year if they want to prevent some real bust type issues for these QB prospects. Yeah. Moving on, Marvin Harrison. So quick thing about the Cardinals. I've been convinced for months and months, or not trading out. They've got more draft picks than anybody. They need good players. They need an elite player or two. There's really nothing to be gained by just trading back. This is not fantasy football. In fantasy football, it kind of makes sense to just keep trading back and taking shots because there's no real stakes. These people want to keep their jobs. Those are real stakes. They're not looking to try to win. Oh, I'm just going to keep adding picks. Adding picks for who? The guy who's going to replace you? I will be blown away if they trade back. And if they do trade back, I promise you it will be a haul like similar to what the Bears got from the Panthers. That's the only way they're trading back. That's the only way they're trading back outside of the top 8 pick range where all the few elite players in this weak draft are going to go. And yes, this is a weak draft. This is a very, very weak draft overall. The wide receiver group is amazing. Maybe the best of all time. We'll see. Who knows? I think the QB room for this draft is amazing. I do. I think it's just so high floor, and I like floors. But damn, I've been talking for a minute. I'm only on pick 4, right? outside of those two positions, outside of O line be the other one. Outside of O line, QB, and wide receiver, this is a weak draft from top to bottom. And even on O line, it's very good, but a lot of these tackles people are expecting to be like really good info players. I mean, I think it's going to take some years, and a lot of them I would just move to guard. I would just move to guard because I care more about. I'd rather have a good guard than an okay tackle any day of the week. Any day of the week. I'd rather have a guard who's in Pro Bowl consideration year in, year out than a tackle who's Mike McGlinchey, which Titans taking Joe Alt at 7. That's exactly who I think Joe Alt is. I don't know how anybody watched that Ohio State tape. Unless you think 44 Ohio State, who had a good year, is going to be a Pro Bowler in the NFL. I mean, then I guess maybe, but like a really good player in the NFL. I don't know how you watch Joe Alt just giving up space, giving up space, giving up space, giving up space, being in his back, going backwards, going backwards, going backwards. Listen, there's a lot of good O-line gurus out there, a lot of good guys you can glean from and learn about the position. I'm certainly no expert, but I will tell you this: if a guy's going backwards in college, if the play starts, ball gets snapped, pass rusher's coming off the line, pass rushers moving towards the tackle or the guard, and tackle, guard, whatever, they're always going backwards, meaning that the pocket, that thing they're supposed to create, that envelope, isn't being created that way. If they're going backwards versus the teams that actually have talent that commiserates with them, like he's a Notre Dame left tackle, he was a high recruit, probably a 4-star or a 5-star, most likely. Ohio State, same thing, same talent level, same tier. If he can't do it in college, the odds of him doing it in the NFL just aren't very high. That's just all there is to it. Now, if someone who's way better at this than me points out, oh, wait, I feel you, but that's because this, and this about his technique, that can get fixed. He can work on that. Okay, and that happens. I remember dude for the Buccaneers who's like all pro. Damn, can't think of his name right now. From Iowa, won the Super Bowl as a rookie with Tom Brady. He had a similar issue a little bit, but I could tell he had functional strength. I could tell he was strong as hell, right? And I feel like Joe Alt's probably the same way. I'm not as confident, but it worries me because he's also 6'8", and these 6'8" guys, they're so tall, they play tall. Mike McGlinchey's my comp for him, and Mike McGlinchey's been an up and down player. He did not have that good of a year for the Broncos at all. You talk to some Broncos fans, tell you it was a bust signing. I would tend to agree. But the 49ers didn't need him, obviously. They just made the Super Bowl again without him. They obviously didn't need him. So, I think Joe Alt will be a fine starter in the NFL, but I just don't think he's going to be a difference maker. I think he'll just be a guy like, okay, cool, we have our left tackle. He'll be good enough that you won't be thinking you need to get a left tackle. But that's not a ringing endorsement, and that's not someone I will care about in the top 10. I think if the draft plays out this way, Cardinals, Chargers, Giants, because I don't think JJ is worth anything close to a first round pick. But if the NFL disagrees, but no one actually trades up for him, yeah, Cardinals, Chargers, and Giants all have gaping holes at wide receiver. So these three should come off the board. Rome Odunze is my number one wide receiver. I'll have to go into that more in another video, but it doesn't really matter though. They're all in the same tier. It doesn't matter. And yeah, this is what I hope this happens. This would be teams really raising their floor, especially the Chargers. The Chargers try to go into this season with anything other than one of these elite wide receiver prospects. That offense is going to suck. I just don't know how to say it. I don't know why people think that you can just not have good offensive players and still have a good offense. I don't know why people think that's a thing. This coach worship shit. It's not real. Jim Harbaugh is probably, I'm not going to say he's overrated, but probably is as an NFL coach. People who were Niners fans will remember that the Niners had a ton of talent when he got there. And if you go back and look, all the good players the Niners had during his run were already 49ers. And most of them had already made a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro team, like Patrick Willis, Justin Smith, etc., before he got there. He didn't even draft Crabtree. He didn't draft Vernon Davis. He didn't draft Alex Smith. He didn't do anything. He just came. Well, he did do things. I'm sorry. He did a lot, but he didn't accumulate these players. But Coach Worship makes people think, oh, we developed him, we developed him, we developed this guy. They were a bunch of losers until John Harbaugh. Well, we'll see. We'll see. The Chargers are in a tough spot financially. They're also just a cursed franchise. Apparently, they can't stay healthy ever when it matters, and all their good players just get hurt routinely. So we'll see what happens. But they definitely need to get something at wide receiver. Quentin Johnson was always going to be a bust. He just had bust written all over him. His flaws as a player are things that lead to wide receivers busting. By the way, wide receivers are one of the most are pretty much the most boom bust position you can take in the draft. Their highs are extremely high. Like when they hit, but their lows, like because of where people take them, just they cripple your team. You want to find a bust that, oh wow, this guy busted. Wow, what a bust. The wide receiver's always at the top of the list. It's QB and wide receiver in that order, pretty much. Like, wow, we got nothing out of this player. But I don't think that's going to happen too much with this draft. I think that as long as teams don't try to, square peg into a hole certain wide receivers who are going to go later, and this is a very deep group. It's almost 20 deep. And as long as people don't try to square peg guys, like try to have Xavier Worthy be a pure outside boundary guy who spreads the field, that'd be a waste of Xavier Worthy. It'd be a waste. But using Xavier Worthy like Tyreek Hill might have some promise. Trying to use him in that capacity at least early on and see how he develops. But these three dudes are absolute studs. It wouldn't surprise me if all three had 1,000 yards as rookies. It'd actually be an upset to most people if they didn't. I think at this point, given how hyped they are and how hyped this class is. But of course, health's a big part of it. What I like about this for these guys is like the Cardinals, the Chargers both have quarterbacks who can absolutely feed a number one wide receiver, feed a number two wide receiver even. The Giants, I think they've got enough. I think Daniel Jones, he's experienced enough. Not very good, but he's experienced enough. And Dabble, I do think, is a good offensive schemer. I think he's got overrated too. People were trying to credit Josh Allen's success to him, which was nonsense. But still, he's a good offensive coach, I think. So those are really good spots for them. Joe Alt, already talked about him. Dallas Turner, Dallas Turner's a good prospect, but he's not. The problem with the edges in this class, and this is why one of the reasons why this class isn't very good, none of the edge players are profile as guys who are going to make a difference versus the run or be good enough versus the run that you're like, okay, cool, like he's rock solid. Teams aren't going to pick on him. I wouldn't be surprised if every last one of them, including Latu, just get picked on for large parts of their career. But as pass rushers, yeah. I see Dallas Turner high in potential as a pass rusher. Some of these other edge guys high in potential. So, and this is a weak class. Like I said, I've only got like 4 or 5 blue chip players, and I've only got like 20 maybe first rounders grades. And I'm not alone. A lot of NFL teams only have like 20 first round grades. I might have less than that though. We'll see. It just isn't there aren't a lot of guys who have that combination of high floor, high ceiling. There just aren't. They either have like high ceiling, low floor, which you don't want to do, or they have, or they like Chop Robinson. Chop Robinson has is a physical specimen, knocks it out of the park, right? Grand slam. And smash at the combine, like right testing. So it's not just you're being tricked on film or anything. Didn't play at a super small school, you're being tricked. Although with DNs that really doesn't happen anyways. I mean, look at Max Crosby. I love Max Crosby. Had a first round grade on him. Didn't care that he was at Eastern Michigan because at Eastern Michigan, he's an Eastern Michigan type prospect. He wasn't a 5-star going to Eastern Michigan. He wasn't just some super freak athlete playing against a bunch of bums. There's good athletes in the MAC. Like he was the same type of recruit pipeline that all the other players were, and he dominated them. So people kind of get that wrong a lot when it comes to shitting on small school guys. But Chop Robinson he just smashes everything except for he just didn't produce. So it's like you want to look at, okay, how many guys? If I look at like the top 50 edge guys of the last 20 years, how many of them were whack-ass producers in college, and see if like it's a reasonable outlier. Me, I think you're better off taking a guy like Chop, day 2, top 50 pick at best, and because the most likely production matters. Production typically matters. So I leave that alone. Dallas doesn't have that problem. He was productive enough, and he's definitely athletic enough. He checks a lot of boxes. Just not quite an elite blue chip prospect. But almost, I don't know if there was a single defensive player in this draft who is. I don't think there is. Definitely none of the corners, no safeties or linebackers. Yeah, none of them are. So Byron Murphy, I think this is too high for him. I understand he looks like he's a really quality interior rusher, but come on. Fontenot, this is one of those guys I would rather have him as a guard. People are going to probably play him at tackle. I would rather have him as a guard. By the way, he was a right tackle at Washington. His QB's left-handed. He was the right tackle. So all the people who think right tackle's not as important, this dude was literally a right tackle. He wasn't a left tackle. And I know that sounds weird because he played on the left side, but the entire schematic approach, if there is one, for coming over a QB's blind side means it was flipped. Now, if there is no approach and that's a myth, then okay, fine. It doesn't matter. But in that case, right tackles are just as important as left tackles then. So pick one. But I like him as a guard. As a guard, I could see him being an extremely high-end player. As a tackle, I see bust factor. I do. I really see a bust factor there. Man, Elijah Vera Tucker and him playing all year with Aaron Rodgers, that'd be dope. That'd be dope. If Jets O-line stays healthy, finally for the first time in 3-4 years, that's going to be an interesting offense for sure. Okay, back to QB. JJ McJesus. Oh boy, man. I thought Baker Mayfield was bad that year in terms of like the takes on him and just people ignoring the problems the player have and people just embellishing and cherry picking stats and cherry picking narratives were like, oh, this guy's good in high leverage. He's good in high leverage situations. JJ McCarthy's so good on third down. But then Bo Nix is like right there in QBR, which is also just a high leverage, statistic. ESPN's total QBR, and you got nothing to say about it. But he's a bum. He needs to go like 80 picks later. I don't get it. Thor Nystrom. But okay. JJ McJesus here, the prince who was promised, is absolutely positively not worth a first round pick. I will die on that hill. I typically don't like to get too like, oh yeah, for sure this with players because situation and randomness, people get hurt who you think are going to be better, etc. But man, I just don't know what people are watching. And I'll get to my theory about that at the end, but basically JJ McJesus here, here's what he's good at. I like the way he runs in the open field. I like the way he escapes pressure. I like the way he reacts to pressure. Those are big positives, right? They really are. So he definitely has some foundational skills. He physically has no limitations that I can see. He does throw mostly just one range, one speed fastball, but he's not the only QB to ever do that in college. That's not a death nail, but it does mean he's going to have to develop. And you don't know if that's going to happen. People are playing the game of, oh, you're young, your age. Well, let's talk about age. Let's look at age real quick. Let me close this one real quick. Let's look at age. This is my... Did I even put... No, I didn't put on there. Okay. These are the franchise guys. This is a list of like 44, 45 QBs since 1998. And this list is based off of a very low bar for success. The bar I used was to get this list is not high. To try to sum it up, because I can't spend all day talking about it, but to try to sum it up, this list is basically if you made 2 Pro Bowls, you made this list. Anyone can get lucky once. I don't know if you can get lucky twice. If you made an All-Pro, you obviously made this list. If you started, I believe it was 100 games in your career, and at least one season you had what I described as a unanimous top 16 year, you made this list. If you started, 80 games with one team, at least 80 games with one team, and had 1 year that was a unanimous top 16 year, you made this list. Top 16, top half of the NFL. And how I determined unanimous was basically I tiered it up. where, okay, accumulation of stats I look at, things like total QBR, SIS data hubs, total points, and a few other things like that, Pro Football Focus overall grade, things like that. I like 5 or 6 of them. And if you were generally in the top 12 range, then I have a hard time thinking someone would argue you were the 17th best quarterback that year. That's essentially it in a nutshell, to try to give myself a range to go off of. And you had to have at least one season like that, right? Nick Foles is on this list. Nick Foles, people don't think Nick Foles is a franchise QB. So I say that to, Chad Pennington's on this list. I say this to put in perspective. This list is not long. This is since 1998. This list is 40, it says 40, 45, or it's really 44 because you know that. But it's really 43 because I threw what's his name on here and he shouldn't be on here yet. Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy shouldn't be on here yet. He needs to play a little bit longer. One of the floor things for this list is, and for my list in general, the good enough a batch, which is a bunch of guys, other guys, I'll get into that another day, is that you got to have 32 starts. Brock Purdy is not there yet. He's at like 24. So really this is only 43 QBs since 1998. And so that means less than 2 QBs a year. That's a very small list of franchise guys. And that's with me having a low floor that will include guys like who you don't care about, like Nick Foles. Who else is on this list? Andy Dalton's on this list. People hate Andy Dalton. Think he's a bum. Like Andy Dalton, like, oh, I don't like Andy. I wouldn't want to spend a first rounder on him because the high end potential isn't there. Well, he's one of 44 guys. Who are you going to spend a first round pick on? Who are you going to spend it on? You know, Kirk Cousins went round 3. He's on this list, obviously. Jalen Hurts has already made it. There's some guys recently. That 2020 class was incredible. They got like 4 guys on this list already, and counting, because Jordan Love's probably going to be here after next year. But every good QB you can think of is on this list. Every good QB you can think of since 98 is on this list. So, and I say all that, when you go to the average age, you know, people are obsessed with the idea that, oh man, you young QBs, you need a young QB, adjusted production, and be young. And if you're young, you can develop. If you're 24, you can't develop. Okay, well let's put that to the test real quick. This is the list. Again, super low floor, crazy low floor, not hard to get on this list, as I just explained. This is Matthew Stafford's first start. He was 21 years old. Lamar Jackson, same thing. Alex Smith, same thing. Michael Vick, same thing. That's the list. Since 1998. Since 1998, you've had over 300 quarterbacks get drafted. That's not counting the undrafted guys who started games, right? Probably got to be at least 330 total players we're talking about there. And you got 4 guys who qualified with a low bar as franchise QBs who started at 21. So even if you think there's something special about J.J. McCarthy because of time and age versus a Michael Penix at 24, whatever you think is there, you're probably looking at a situation where they're going to need to sit on the bench. Sat as a rookie. I used to have these as yes or no's, but I wanted to try to quantify the data more, so I turned it to 10 and 0. But anyone with a 10 is a yes. That means they sat as a rookie. And I qualified sitting as a rookie as sitting until November 1st, essentially. So, which basically means you had 6 months from the time you were drafted to the time you had to start games, which is nothing. But the NFL won't do it. They won't do it with a lot of players. They won't do it. They'll just, you got to get out there, you got to play. So yeah, we got 4 guys since 98 who've been franchise QBs and started age 21. And look at these guys. 3 of them were number 1 overall picks. So it's not like you can say, oh well, you're just picking up, you know, it's using guys who were like day 3 picks. No, these were the number 1 picks in the draft. That's who they were. And then the one who wasn't is Lamar Jackson, who's a one-of-one unicorn player at quarterback, like a super duper version of Michael Vick. Michael Vick said it himself, with crazy elite dual threat ability, and went in the first round also. So this is outlier shit. Being 21 and being good enough to play in the NFL and have a good career starting right away is outlier shit. So if you're gonna jump on the JJ train of potential, you gotta project. Mel Kiper's logic, right? He's washed. Then That means you have to believe also that he needs to sit. And if your QB needs to sit, you don't need to be trading up for them. And you don't need, or even if you do, you definitely don't need to be taking them that damn high. I don't think Patrick Mahomes needed to sit. I don't think anyone thinks that anymore because of how good he is. With that said, he did sit, right? And it definitely benefited him. Go listen to him talk about that. You don't take my word for it. Go listen to him talk about that. He'll tell you in detail how much it helped him, how he couldn't even read defenses. But hey, just throw every QB out, and if you're not good, you're not good. Yeah, right. Okay, okay, Evan Silva. All right. And even the 22-year-old list isn't that long, by the way. And a lot of these 22-year-olds are recent players. These are recent years, and has to do with the hubris of the NFL and their stupidity. Most guys are 23, 24, dude, and up. Most guys are. There's plenty of guys who've been 23 and up, and they still developed. Joe Flacco was not near as good in his prime as he was, or sorry, wasn't near as good as a rookie as he was in his prime. Neither was Ben Roethlisberger. Neither was Matt Ryan. Neither was Derek Carr as a rookie. Donovan McNabb, really? He got way better after his rookie year, and he was 24 when he took his first start as a rookie. Carson Wentz, same thing. Like, what are you talking about? People are on dumb shit. It's simple Jackonian to think that if you're a certain age, there's a causal link, there's something causal going on, and you just won't be good, or you won't develop. That's not real. That's not true. But because people think it is, they think this guy right here has all this untapped potential. He doesn't. He doesn't. He does not. He has a super inconsistent game. He's not consistently accurate. He doesn't read defenses at some high level. He wasn't dissecting defenses at Michigan. They were running a very simple offense. Just because he was under center more than what QBs normally are these days in college does not mean he ran some high-level pro-style offense. You know who did run a high-level pro-style offense, who he compares to? Mark Sanchez. And that's my comparison for him. That's what I think his most likely outcome is a more mobile version of Mark Sanchez. His ceiling is like Alex Smith, but that's like the absolute best case scenario. I don't even expect to see that. I expect to see Mark Sanchez, a version of Mark Sanchez. Which, listen, Mark Sanchez went to 2 conference championship games. Again, that's another video for another day. How important is the QB position, really? But, yeah, so Mark Sanchez also went to a great situation. So people will look at the fact that he's going to the Vikings, and I get it, he's going to the Vikings. So McJesus gets Justin Jefferson, who doesn't even want him. He wants Jaden Daniels. But whatever, he's going to have 2 or 3 really good weapons with Hawkinson and Addison, and then the O-line's not bad. They got left tackle and center locked down as long as they're healthy. It is the best situation available this year. The coach isn't bad. The offensive scheme isn't bad. It fits what he already does. A lot of things he already can do a little bit. But man, just because you are in a good situation does not mean you're going to be a good player. Jameis Winston went number 1 overall. Baker Mayfield went number 1 overall. They both went number 1 overall, went to good situations, and still flopped with those teams. Period. Point blank, period. They both went to good situations. Yes, the Browns were a good situation. If you don't understand the Browns were a good situation, you probably don't know what you're watching on Sundays. They had an elite O-line all 4 years he was in Cleveland. They had an elite run game all 4 years he was in Cleveland. That by itself, I don't even have to say anything else. But his receivers were never bottom tier. Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham, I think both had 1,000-yard years with him. Odell and his father would tell you he would have had 1,500 yards if Baker didn't suck so bad that year that he was healthy with them. So he just wasn't good. Neither was Winston. Winston had Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans breaking into the NFL. And he also got Deshaun Jackson later. He also had Chris Godwin. I mean, damn, Jameis Winston had a ton of weapons, and he just couldn't do anything with them. He couldn't. He was erratic. That's because he was a turnover machine in college. Once he got away from like the layup situation of his very first freshman year, he clearly wasn't going to work that hard. He showed up to the combine and jogged his 40. I mean, the red flags were everywhere. Baker got drunk during the draft process, got detained or arrested. The flags were there. Like, I'm super out on guys who get drunk during the process. I know Dak Prescott is an exception, but I'm like out on it. I'm like I'm dropping you a round, 2 rounds, and I don't care. You can just be good later. That is like that tells me enough because if you can't work hard enough and smart enough then when everything's on the line and you're trying to set up yourself for your future, why should I think you're going to do it as a pro? Anyways, JJ is, even if he goes to the Vikings, which he very well may, I think he could just fall to 11 to them. But I think if he gets that close, I do think the Broncos will trade up. I think the Broncos would trade up with either the Bears if all those receivers are gone. I don't think the Bears are moving if any of the top receivers are there, and or with even the Falcons possibly. I think if JJ falls far enough past 6, I think the Broncos try to trade up for him, or the Vikings will have to try to trade up for him to get him because I don't think he's gonna make it out of the top 10, which is insane because this is not a top 10 prospect. There's more stuff I want to say about how McJesus is overrated and how people have lost their minds, but I just don't have the time. Or I've been talking for like an hour. I want to get through this. Latu, really high end pass rushing prospect. I think just not good against the run. We'll see how he develops. I hope he stays healthy. It's a really great story. Fashanu's got some weak aspects to his game, but if he can get over his hand size and he can clean up the one or two things, I follow Trench Warfare and their work they do with O linemen and stuff, which is excellent, elite stuff. And I like Fashanu's strength, like his technique, how he anchors is incredible. So like, there's a lot there to like. I just wouldn't take him, top 10. But he's definitely like a first round prospect for sure. And the Saints really need help. I don't know how they don't go tackle. Brock Bowers, I wish I could talk a little more about him. But basically, to sum it up, think of like Jordan, or what was his name? Not Jordan Travis. Jordan, he was the Redskins tight end. He had a really good run for like 2 years. And he was like a pure pass catching guy. Brock Bowers makes me think of him. It's Jordan something, or something Jordan. Brock Bowers, I think they're like the same player basically. It alarms me that he didn't test. I think that kind of scares me. I feel like more than half the time when guys don't test and they're supposedly great athletes, it's because they're not as great as you think. Marvin Harrison, I didn't say this earlier, but for me, he profiles more as like, his floor is like a better version of Corey Davis, who also didn't test because he was injured. Marvin was not, but Corey Davis, you can tell he wasn't some high-end super athlete, for the position. And I don't think Marvin is either. Would it surprise me if he was? No, it wouldn't surprise me, because on film sometimes it looks that way, but film can be misleading. So, you gotta be careful. Brock Bowers, I have a feeling maybe he's not the athlete we think he is, but whatever. At the end of the day, tight ends don't need to be going that high in the draft anyways. They just don't need to be going in the top 20 ever. So there's just no reason to be doing that. And I'm not going to do it. I'm definitely not going to do it. I'm going to leave that shit alone. So, the Colts are probably I don't think he makes it past the Colts. So he's probably going top 15. And if and when he busts in terms of like actually making a difference for their team, don't be surprised, because tight ends, that's typically what first round drafted tight ends tend to do. They tend to not make a difference. Remember Kellen Winslow? Remember how good a prospect he was? Generational. He was generational, just like this guy. Generational. Okay, Michael Penix. I need to wrap this up. It's a shame. I spent so much time talking about QBs who I don't even think or have that much promise. Michael Penix and Bo Nix. I don't know if he even has Bo Nix in his first round mock. Let's see. J.C. Latham, Terry and Arnold, Adonai, Cooper DeJean. Fuaga, I'd rather have him at guard than Joe Alt at tackle too. I think Fuaga could be an all-pro guard. I really do. I don't know if Joe Alt's ever going to make an all-pro team as a tackle. Xavier Worthy of the Dolphins makes a lot of sense to me. Tyreek's retiring after this year, he said. This team loves speed. They use speed. It's what Tua did in college. It's what Tua's doing in the pros, because Mike McDaniels is a smart coach who understands the best thing an offensive coach can do is put his players in the position to succeed. So the offense they run is the offense that suits Tua. That's what they do. People think McDaniels is just like Pinchero or whatever puppeteering Pinocchio, puppeteering Tua and Tagovailoa, and it's not true. He's just doing basic common sense shit in a large part by making sure the offense they run doesn't contradict what their QB's actually good at, which is quick throw accuracy game. Go look at Tua's numbers, his like when you siphon out and filter his numbers and how quick he was to throw in college and the types of routes he threw. That's what they're doing in the pros. I don't know what offense you think McDaniels will be running with some QB that you think is so much better than Tua, but I don't know who those QBs are either. I really don't, other than like the top 3, 4 guys in the league. Who else is it? But anyways, Xavier Worthy really fits what they do there. That makes a lot of sense. And I don't think Xavier Worthy is getting past the Dolphins, to be honest. Guys as fast as him just always get steamed up. Teams are obsessed with speed, cleavage, and arm strength for quarterbacks, cleavage. That's what they're obsessed with. So Quinyon Mitchell, I think he's a little overrated, but I think all the corners are overrated. But I'd be happy if the Eagles took him. I'm an Eagles fan. I'd be happy. I think he's a solid prospect and he's worth a first rounder. So we'll see how he plays. If I don't think he's gonna be playing 8 yards off though like he did in college. I think he's gonna have to. I think he's gonna be bumping and running. But that's what he did at the Senior Bowl, and apparently he was dominant there. So Graham Barton I like a lot as an interior player. Another guy who played tackle in college. If you just switch him to guard, I think you got something really good there. And it's not like the NFL doesn't need guards. They do. So it makes sense. This would be a good draft. What the Vikings should do is not take JJ. Take a guard, take one of these tackles who should play guard or whatever. Take one of them at 11. And then, or take Olu Fashanu and put him at right tackle or something at 11. And then just take Bo Nix right here at 23. That would make way more sense. Significantly more sense. J.J. McCarthy is not a prospect worthy of not doing that. He's not even close. But I digress. I've talked enough about him, about McJesus. Blessed be his name. Amarius Mims and Tyler Guyton, it will not surprise me at all if those are the 2 best tackles from this class. Not one bit. I like both of them. If people talk about projection and high-end potential, swing for the fences, I like the potential of these 2 dudes. I think it's enormous. I like it a lot better than Joe Alt. I really like both these players. I do think they need time, especially Guyton. They need a year to 2 years, but that's normal. Most linemen need a year. Like it's a normal thing. With QBs, people like are weird about it, giving them time to develop. But with linemen, typically speaking, it's like if a first round pick doesn't start right away, no one's batting an eye like, oh man, he's a bust already. But if a QB doesn't, it's like, oh man, he couldn't beat this guy out who I think sucks. So I think that's the cool thing about being a lineman is you get the time. You get time to develop. Teams are counting on you. And there's no weird political reasons of front office, owners, put him out there anyways. None of that stuff's even possible. So Jared Verse, to me, that's just a locked in first round guy. Won't surprise me if he's the best edge in this draft. And he of all the edges, he strikes me as the guy most likely to develop into a average to above average run defender in this class. I already talked about Chop. Crazy potential as a pass rusher. Crazy potential. Could really, really be devastating on third downs for people, on passing downs. Brian Thomas, a lot of people really like his game. Matt Wallman really likes his game. I will say this. Almost every pass this dude caught in college was a great pass. Like, he did not have to make a lot of adjustments in college on his passes, and all those passes were from Jaden Daniels. He had for the most part, I think like 97% were from Jaden Daniels. He did not have to do that. So I think he definitely, if he's on Buffalo, I think that's a good fit. If he's on the Bengals, that's a good fit. If he's somewhere with a QB, of course, any receiver, this is true, but if he's somewhere with a QB who really has a track record of being able to get the ball to their guy on target, that makes sense. Kool-Aid McKinstry, honestly, is the last corner. He might be the best one in this class. I haven't even scouted him yet. But everyone seems to like him. Alabama players get overrated a lot. We'll see. I don't even know if he ran or not. But we'll see about that. This to me, Jackson Powers Johnson. No, I'm not being an Oregon homer, but to me, this is the best. This is the best O lineman in the draft. It is. I guess there's potentially some injury concerns. I don't know, but um, to me, this is the best O lineman in the draft. And if you can, any team getting him in the 20s should be happy, very happy. Um, Best first step I've ever seen for a center going from the snap like and getting into their stance. I've never seen something that fast, that fluid, extremely powerful, amazing size for the position, great in the run game, and doesn't cede position. He doesn't just sit there. Okay, I'm gonna go back in my quarterback's lap now. He doesn't do that. You're more likely to see him block two guys in the play than you are to see him on the film than you are to see him go backwards into his quarterback's lap. I don't understand why people are okay with linemen going backwards into the quarterback's lap. That should be the first thing on tape you're looking for. How many times do you do that? You did that like 8 times this game. Bad. Bad, bad, bad. Okay. Kingsley Sumataya, or however you say his name. Oh, damn. Wanya Morris would be his blindside protector. Yeah, it's not good. Damn, they need a tackle. I haven't looked at him yet either, but from what I have looked at, I haven't looked at his film, but what I have looked at in his profile, he looks like a guard too. So I don't know why people, look, just because you play tackle in college does not mean you gotta play in the NFL. There's certain things that are required to play tackle in the NFL, and not everybody has it coming right out of school. Teams are there are gonna be teams who find tackles in round 3 and round 4 this year. I promise you, it's gonna happen. But a lot of guys who are supposed to be tackles, they're just not gonna work out. The team's gonna be like, you know what? We want to start our best 5. Let's just put him at guard. Let's just do it. Lad McConkey. Oh, I wish I had time to go in on these receivers and the stupid the gaslighting of the poor victim white athlete. Oh my God. But I've already been talking forever, and I still got to talk about Bo Nix and Michael Penix. Okay, so Bo Nix didn't make his mock. He doesn't think he's going to go. People don't want Bo Nix to go in the first round. That I want to throw that out there. If he goes in the first round, a lot of people will look dumb because they've been talking about how he's not a first round pick. Then he goes in the first round. That means the NFL didn't agree with you. Even though the NFL's bad at what they do and they're not really good at developing players, you know, but B, drafting them. Look at the draft record. Like they're not. It's both. It's both things, and they're not good at it. So if Bo Nix goes in round 1, especially in the top 20, it makes them look bad. A lot of these prognosticators and these pundits and these talking heads. Same thing with JJ McCarthy. If JJ McCarthy doesn't go in the top at this point, given how much he's been steamed up by people for no reason, that makes them look bad. One more thing about JJ. I knew I was forgetting something. I pay a lot of attention with QBs to the games they played versus teams where their team's roster rank. If you don't know what roster rank is, that's the 5-year average of your recruiting, right? Height, weight, speed. People, the SEC is the best conference. Why is the SEC the best conference? Because of height, weight, speed, and strength, right? That's recruiting. Recruiting rankings are based around height, weight, speed, and strength. They're based around what the NFL looks for in draft profiles. That's a fact. So recruiting roster rank matters. And so I like to pay attention to that. That's like the main thing. How did you play? I don't care how Bo Nix looked against Portland State. I don't care how J.J. McCarthy looked against Bowling Green, although he looked terrible versus them. I don't care. I care how you play against the top teams you play. And while I make some exceptions, I have like my ranges. Usually it's 20.0 if you're out of conference, 30.0 if you're in conference. I'll make an exception if it's like a conference championship game or a bowl game maybe. Looking at Bo Nix's top opponents he played, he looks to me like Andy Dalton. He looks like a better version of Andy Dalton, a more athletic version, with much more high-end traits in terms of understanding pressure and blitzes and mitigating pressure and responding well to it. Bo Nix's peripheral vision on film, including back at Auburn as a freshman, is some of the best I've ever seen from a prospect. And that is a very high foundational trait to have. So I think Bo Nix's floor is actually the highest floor in the draft. Like I would say his floor is just a tiny little speck above Caleb Williams. But It really depends on who drafts them and how they value them. With QBs, man, you get drafted like the Raiders. Raiders look like a great spot to some people. To other people, it's like, dude, it's the Raiders, right? The problem is that the Raiders just put a coach in who they could easily just move on from anytime they want. That's the reality of the linebacker that was the interim coach last year, whose name's escaping me right now. That they have in place. They could just move on from him whenever they want to. That's the kind of coach he is. Now, if he makes the playoffs this year, that changes a little bit. Not too much. We've seen guys win 10 games, make playoffs, get fired before, but it changes a little bit. Antonio Pierce, that's the name. So Bo Nix gets drafted to a team like the Saints. The Saints are a spot that I think normally would be a good spot. However, you get to sit behind Derek Carr. That's great. They've got some good weapons. That's great. Problem is that if the coach gets removed, which I think he will be, I think this is their current head coach is Dennis Allen, his last year in the Saints, unless they make the playoffs. Then next year you get another coach in, and now do they care about this second round pick, about this first round pick? If your coach doesn't like you and you're a quarterback, you're in trouble, man. Your career's in trouble. That's just the reality of it. So some of these spots that should be good because of the coaching situation, because of what happens with front offices and ownership and everything, it can be, and the coach doesn't like you, can be a problem. Now, the good news is that if you get replaced with a new coach, that owner and that GM aren't going to hire you if they think you don't like that QB. However, you only got to convince them in an interview or two that you do, even if you don't. So it's a problem. Penix and Bo, to me, are super undervalued. People don't know what to look for with QBs. Again, like I said about the Kirk Cousins thing, both these guys are better prospects than Kirk Cousins was, I think, coming out of Michigan State. Or at the very least, they're in this same exact tier, at the very least. And in Penix's case, no one had better tape in terms of making accurate downfield passes. Now, he had a lot of downfield passes that were not accurate, for sure. That's where he's like with Drake May, and I think they're in that same bucket. Like, I put those two in the same bucket, basically, of like maybe top 50, maybe not day two, but like top 50 player in the draft, because they're just so boom bust. But the boom is very good. The boom is very good. If I put either of those guys on Minnesota, I think you're in a really good spot, especially if you let Sam Darnold play and through into November. I think you're in a really good spot to develop this QB properly and have some really good success. Penix never was the bad player in terms of like mitigating pressure that people made him out to be based off one Michigan game. The Washington State game was actually much worse, I thought. That was his worst game in my opinion, not Michigan. But Michigan wasn't good either. And but this guy he didn't run a 4.5 at his pro day for no reason. He was a dual threat coming out of high school. He was a dual threat at Indiana before injuries supposedly robbed him. He does move funny. He moves funny. He walks funny. He moves funny because of his injuries he's had. I truly believe that. But he's proven these last 2 years that it does not bother him as a player. And he has a lot of good film making great pocket movements, and he has a lot of great film understanding pressure's coming and making moves and decisions before it even gets there. QB's sacks, people say, is a QB stat, and I'd say that's true about 50% of the time or so. Like, sacks are a QB stat. Like, QBs control 50+% of their sacks without question. They also control a pretty good percentage of their pressures too. I've realized watching Penix and Bo, because those two, in my opinion, mitigate a lot of pressures. Like, a lot of things that would have been pressures or tallied as pressures. Pressures are very subjective too. How people tally them, it depends on who you're getting your stats from. But pressures can definitely be nullified if the QB is just ahead of the clock, ahead of schedule on a particular play, because their pre-snap read and or post-snap just was on point. And of course the offense plays a role in that too. But that's neither here nor there. So these two QBs, Penix definitely had a great cast, an amazing cast. Rome definitely made him look better than he is this past year. He also had two tackles who are going to play in the NFL, a running back who's pretty good, I think he's underrated, and a tight end who probably is going to play in the NFL. He and two other receivers. I mean, the whole offense is a bunch of NFL players. So Michael Penix, I still think Jay Daniels had the best situation, but it's Jay Daniels, tier break, Michael Penix, tier break again, and then you have McCarthy and Bo, and then tier break again probably, and then you have Caleb and Drake May. Um, but Penix has everything you need to be a successful QB in the NFL. It's just a matter of people understanding that he does need to develop more. He does have a lot of mechanical deficiencies with his footwork, with his throwing motion, or basically with how he ties his throwing motion to his feet, basically. That does need to be ironed out. You should not just throw him out there. Now, I've said that before about players. I was as high on Justin Herbert as anyone I know, and I still thought he needed to sit. Just because, well, partially because I let other people's opinions get in my head, but also because there were just tiny little things about his decision making in certain situations, which I do think it spilled over into the NFL. But the thing is like certain things you can't develop out of a guy. Like if a guy for some reason is great all game long, and then in the fourth quarter he just isn't. If that happens, or like late in the fourth quarter he isn't, that's probably not something that's ever going to be fixed. So you're just gonna have to live with it. Sorry, you're just gonna have to live with that. But and some people think that's Justin Herbert, but Penix needs to sit. He needs to iron those things out. He needs just a little bit of time, and then I think it's wheels up. I really do. I think it's wheels up. I do think he'll put in the work. If I'm wrong, and he'll suck. That's it. But his floor to me is Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's like a more mobile, probably better overall version of Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then his ceiling is, which I don't expect him to hit this, but it's possible. This player's in the Hall of Fame, but he's in the Hall of Fame for more for longevity than anything else, and that's Warren Moon, who also went to Washington and also played Michigan his last college game of his career. They beat Michigan though. And yeah, I think Warren Moon and Michael Penix have very similar playing styles, similar size, almost identical, probably similar athletes too. So I don't expect anyone to be calling him Warren Moon, but if he plays the next 15, 20 years, then this will I'll look back on this 15, 20 years from now and be like, wow, boy, can I scout. Bo Nix, like I said, Andy Dalton, that's who he reminds me a lot of. I guess if I had to go on, that's the most likely outcome too, is a better version of Andy Dalton. But if I had to go super high end, I heard someone say Tony Romo. That made no sense to me, but the Zach Zerline. But I would say it'd be kind of like what you get from Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is really good. Is a consummate pro. Puts in the work. Just leader of your franchise. Knockout. What a draft pick, third round pick. Wow. But and he's a guy who he can feed multiple players. He's shown high level field reading multiple years in his career. He is worth a top 10 pick in every draft. Looking back on it, I mean, look how good he was as a rookie, right? Great situation, of course. That's another one. Dak Prescott had one of the best situations you'll ever see. Right there with Mahomes, right there with Carson Palmer. Caleb doesn't have anything like that. Caleb doesn't have anything close to what those guys had. But anyways, Bo Nix, I guess at a very, very high end, he could be Dak Prescott, I guess. Now, am I counting on that? No, definitely not. I'm not expecting that at all. I think Andy Dalton's more reasonable, but Andy Dalton should be a first round pick too. He went third pick in the second round, and he played like a first rounder throughout his prime, throughout his time in Cincinnati. That's what he did. He actually had MVP votes. It was sad. It was his best year, but he got hurt like 9, 8, 10 games in. He was getting MVP votes, kind of like how Tua was getting MVP, was the leader for the MVP 2 years ago before he got hurt. And then the Dolphins limped into the playoffs. Their offense was trash because McDaniels can't really do much without Tua. So that's another thing. But whatever. Bo Nix is a lot better prospect than people think. People keep bringing up how he threw short. He did not throw short. They just threw a lot of screens. If you take out screen plays, if you take out the short passes, the like design short pop plays and stuff from all the QBs, and you filter them the way I did, Bo Nix, and others have done too, Bo Nix threw downfield at a very high level. He still smashed all his numbers, all his efficiency. It doesn't fall off, so it doesn't even matter if his A dot's low, because when his A dot's high, throwing past the sticks, looking at throws past the sticks, it's still at the top of the nation, right there with Jaden Daniels. So the narratives around Bo Nix have been a joke. It's an Oregon thing though. Oregon players and Oregon QBs especially always get a lot of whack, stupid narratives attached to their games and their profiles. And then, group resonance is real. So when you have enough people saying the same thing over and over and thinking the same thoughts, that has an effect in real life. Even if it's not real, it has an effect. So like players have to overcome that. Certain players come into the NFL and they literally will have to win a Super Bowl to make people shut up about them. Josh Allen, because of how bad people thought he would be as a pro, and it's all time bad. Like all time most disrespected prospect ever is Josh Allen. He will have to win a Super Bowl to get people to fully shut up. Even last year, people were still complaining, oh, turnover prone and da da da. And I mean, he turns the ball over less than Peyton Manning did at this point in his career, through from start to this point through 5-6 years. But you'll never hear that about Peyton Manning. That's because the narratives around Peyton Manning weren't the same. That's why it's all the narratives. So Bo Nix's narratives are that he's not good. What's his name? Tice, not Mike Tice, whatever his name is, the Tice guy on The Athletic. He called him Taylor Heineke. Wow, Taylor Heineke. Hey, maybe he'll be right. We'll see. I highly doubt it, but maybe he'll be right. But if he's not Taylor Heineke and he's closer to Dak Prescott, oh boy, man, that's going to be some good receipts to say for sure. There's been a lot of people who the receipts for Bo Nix, if he's good, a lot of people are going to look stupid, man. And it's weird because he's the all-time leader in starts and experience. As a freshman at Auburn, he broke out. They won 9 games. They beat Alabama. They beat Oregon his very first start as a true freshman. And Auburn sucked, dude. I don't know what's wrong with people. Auburn sucked. You can't name an Auburn O-lineman in the NFL from that time period. You probably can't anyways. You definitely can't name a good one. You can't name an Auburn receiver. Remember that one dude who was so fast, Schwartz. Oh, people loved him. Oh, yeah, he's a sneaky draft prospect. Dude's out of the NFL already, I think. What are you talking about? Seth Williams was the most overrated, inconsistent, drops, bad teammate, bad attitude, fake alpha wide receiver prospect ever. He never materialized. He didn't materialize in college. He didn't materialize on practice squads. I think he's out of the NFL. So he didn't have anything at Auburn. If you go watch him play, he was always under pressure. And all he did was keep fighting through adversity, transferred, upped his game, improved his game, and he did it with the same offensive coordinator from Auburn. I mean, come on. And there's just so much to like here. But because he's older and people have really bad logic they use with age, as I showed, and they're like using weird data points where they're probably cherry picking data, and they're probably using draft day, which is stupid, really dumb. Why would you care more about when a guy's drafted than when a guy actually gets on the field for the first time? Make it make sense, but okay. That's why people are, thinking that a guy like Bo Nix isn't worth it, isn't valuable. To me, this is a locked-in guy, first-round worthy quarterback, right alongside Jaden Daniels. Definitely would take him over Drake May. I'd take a lot of people over J.J. McCarthy. By the time I'm done, I might take, from Tulane over J.J. McCarthy. I actually, one more thing to say about J.J. McJesus, shitting on him some more. This guy, his top 5 games, Iowa, Ohio State, Penn State, Alabama, and Washington. Those 5 games combined, he completed 9 passes that traveled 10 yards or more past the line of scrimmage, and the longest one, only one of them went over 20 yards past, and it was 21 yards. I believe it was versus Washington. That's it. If that is not a game manager, if you cannot mentally see that he was in a game manager role, 28 straight runs versus Penn State, and you just keep saying, well, no, he's not a game manager, they just didn't need to pass. That's okay. Those are the same thing. Those are the same exact damn thing. Unbelievable. The mental gymnastics of this. But if you cannot see that that's a game manager, you know what? I'm not gonna call anyone names. I'm just gonna say, what is a game manager then? If that's not the profile of a game manager, barely throwing passes past that go anywhere, relying on yak yards just like anyone else, relying on screens or the equivalent. There's a lot of passes that are just as good as screens, but they're not technically screens. They're so short and quick, though, quick passes. It's the same shit, dude. Simple offense. It was very simple. That definitely benefited from a strong run game, just like everyone else's, probably more so than anyone else's. And I don't even have time to get into the schedule and the Big Ten and how overrated the Big Ten is and all that, but whatever. Um, if that's not a game manager, what is? It ain't like game manager doesn't exist at all. People use it all the time. People were just using it all last year with Brock Purdy. And he tops the NFL and EPA and everything else. Although EPA is a team stat, but almost all QB stats are team stats. So, if McJesus is not a game manager, then I don't know what I guess that it doesn't exist. Then I guess there's no such thing as a game manager. You can hand the ball off 500 times in a row, and you're still a great quarterback prospect. Like you don't even need to pass anymore. Apparently, you don't even need to throw the ball. You don't need to throw the ball down the field at all. There is no tape of this guy being impressive down the field at all in his profile. And the couple of games where they really let him throw for even a short part of that game were TCU and I believe it was Bowling Green. In both games, he just turnover JJ popped up. I smell a bust, but hey, he might go to Minnesota, which will definitely give him a really good chance because he is a day 2 prospect for sure. He's definitely that talented. I don't think I'd probably take Daniel Jones over him coming out of Duke if they were in the same draft, but it's close. And I didn't think much of Daniel Jones at all, so I'm really hoping the Giants or the Commanders take JJ. As an Eagles fan, make me really happy. But yeah, I definitely take Bo Nix over him, take Penix over him. It's an easy choice. Don't have to think twice about it. Don't even think once about it. Don't think 0 times about it. There's nothing to think about. But yeah, that's all I got. I've talked long enough, and I'm gonna try to come back and do after the draft, after people get on their teams, do my big board and go into some detail on some other things. Thanks for listening.